Hey, what's up everyone? Tim here from Everyday Tactical Vids, and this is the second video in a two-part series talking about this, which is the MSK-1 from Ultimate Survival Tips. So in the first video, what I did was I put the knife to use. I talked about some of the different configurations and setups for the knife, for the sheath system, just a lot of different ways you can organize this system. And now in this video, what we're going to do is talk about it a little bit more in depth as far as my experience with it and some things that I'm noticing that I want to share with you all. So if you haven't seen that first video, you can click the Show More tab down in that description section and then click the link. I've got a link back over to the first video, so you can check that out, and then that'll kind of frame out what this video is going to talk about. So the first thing I want to mention is that you can see I've made some changes. So first thing is that I've reconfigured it. So I've set it up on the ballistic nylon sheath. You can see I have the smaller version of the MSK-1 here, and then I have a Theorem cell vault, and then I put the orange handles on. Inside, I do have about 90% of the survival kit that was in the handle, but I did use one of the little fire starters, the little fire tenders inside there, so that wasn't included. I didn't replace it, but I've got the vast majority of the gear in here. So if you know Everyday Tactical Vids, I regularly think about systems when it comes to knives. So this is how I've set this one up. Let me show you. I've got a couple others here. I've got the Tops Kukri, the Bushcraft Kukri with the Puko. I've got the Streamlight, what is that, the Microstream, and then a fire steel from Exotech down here. And then I've also got with me my system that I built for the SE Hungless. So we've got the Hungless, and then I usually have the RB3 here, but that's out with Micah from Black Bear Custom Kydex. He's making another sheath for me with that. And then I have a sheath with a like an Altoids tin with some gear in there, and this actually, that one's built for an SE, I think 5 or 6 sheath, but he custom fit this so it would fit this system I have. So as you can see, systems are a way I like to think about knives and set them up, and so with the MSK-1 I did the same thing. So with this, I've got the fire steel right here, got the cell vault, got the smaller knife, the larger knife, and the survival kit inside. The next thing I want to mention to you is the balance on this knife, and I want to tell you that it's very nicely balanced. So just how it, how they built it with the weight out here and the weight back here, it really does have, a nice center balance. Let me get it lined up right here. But you can see, once I get it set, you can see it's very nicely balanced. I mean, right toward the middle of the knife. So, which is good. I mean, that's how I prefer a knife to be. Unless it's a big hefty chopper, I want some of that weight out front. But it is nicely balanced. So if you're someone who that matters to, I'll let you know that that's definitely a reality for this knife, that it's nicely balanced. And yeah, that's something worth noting, I think. Next thing I'll mention is that if you see the full-size knife and you're like, yeah, I'd really like to try that out, but that style of blade, like, is that going to work for me? Maybe the answer is to go with the mini version. So this is the mini version. As I mentioned in the previous video, the way David has the wrap set up, it's really thick, which for me is great, gives me some really good control. It's kind of the size of like an SE Azula, but 154 cm is your steel instead of 1095. And then the other thing is that you can put some gear in the handle because it's got a hollowed out handle in there. And so you can put a fire steel in there, a couple other things if you wanted to in there as well. So, price point for this is going to be significantly less than going with the full system or even just the MSK-1. So if you want to start out, maybe start with this, see what you think about this style of knife. Obviously it's smaller, it's lighter, it's more agile than a bigger knife. I mean, as any smaller knife is compared to a bigger knife. But maybe that style of blade is something you want to test out, and if you like it, then you want to actually upgrade or add on the full-size MSK-1. Next thing I want to mention is the survival kit in the handle. Now, if you're not familiar with the gear in this survival kit or any survival kit, it's not going to be helpful to you. This is obviously a very small survival kit. This is not something I'm going to bank my whole life on. It doesn't have anything to cover me. It doesn't have any kind of tarp or, Mylar blanket or something like that. It's just too small of a space to put something like that in. But that being said, if you know how to use the gear in here, it can be really helpful. I mean, between fire steel, something to get the fire started if you get a cut, you've got the antibiotic ointment, that's fishing items, some cordage. So I think sometimes people look down on those small kits, which I get, because if you don't know how to use them, they're pointless. But if you know how to use the items, they can really be a help. I'll refer to my SE Escape and Evasion wallet right here that I shot a video on, and I'll put a link to this at the end of this video as well. This was a scenario that my wife and I used a bunch of this gear out in the desert when we were out in Nevada. So yeah, I mean, if you know how to use the gear, it can be helpful. You can see that I believe in that because I even put one of those on the Hungless setup as well. So I don't think you should ever bank your life on an Altoids tin or an Altoids survival kit that small, or a handle survival kit for that matter. But I do want to say that I really like Wazoo Survival Gear. They make good quality gear. They're the ones who built the kit in conjunction with David over at Ultimate Survival Tips. So yeah, I would say, you know, my recommendation is if you're going to go full bore on this knife, get an extra survival kit and work with it and get familiar with it so that you know the items in there and you can use them well. Next thing I want to mention is the little cutout there, the little notch for striking your fire steel. So I did this on the video, but I'm gonna show you again that it does work. It's not like, you know, it's built and it doesn't actually function. It definitely does the job. So this is a new fire steel, so I'm gonna have to scrape some of the coating off here, but you'll see it definitely throws sparks off that little notch there. Now I want to contrast that with this right here, which is the Chango notch on the Tops Bob. Great knife, very popular. This one does work too, but it took a little bit more working with it and getting used to it before I could actually, it could work well for me. And that's been true for a good number of people. So I will tell you that if you're like, I'm skeptical on this notch because of this notch, the one on the MSK-1 is just easier to use. The next thing I want to mention is about chopping. Now, based on the weight, because it is nice and balanced, it's not like you have a ton of weight out front like you would with like maybe the Hungless or this Tops Kukri that I was just showing you before. But I can tell you that it's a good chopper, especially, you know, I put a lanyard on it, run your hand in here, and you get this thing out in front and it will chop. Now, you can talk about the grinds and preferred grinds for chopping and stuff, but this isn't made to be just a chopper. It's made to be a multi-use or multi-scenario knife. So I think there's probably grinds out there that would make it an even better chopper, but you'd lose some functionality on the other end of things. But you can see the way I have this set up, I basically have like my middle finger and my first finger and my thumb, and now it really gives me some leverage to chop with this thing. So the stuff I chopped before in the last video wasn't pine, it was definitely a harder wood, but this thing, I mean, it will chop. You know, whenever you're chopping with a knife, you want to be aware that if you're doing a ton of chopping work and you hit a knot or you miss and you hit a rock or something like that, it's going to ding up your knife. So just something to be aware of as you're using a knife to chop. If it's not like a dedicated chopping tool, like an axe, a hatchet, even the Bushcraft Kukri is kind of in between, you know, a Kukri and it's a little bit smaller, so it's kind of like a knife. Just be aware, just be aware. But I'll tell you that this thing can chop, and especially when you put a lanyard on, that definitely helps out. All right, next thing I want to talk about is the bow drill divot. So as you can see, we've got one right there in the center. I mentioned this in the last video, but if you have never used a man-made bow drill divot, as opposed to like a piece of wood with some, you know, maybe some green leaves kind of crushed up inside to keep it running smoothly so it doesn't start burning on you, it's notably different. It's just way easier to use a man-made bow drill divot, especially one that's got some sort of metal. This is the Firecraft 5 from White River, and I made a bow drill fire with this in the review I did with this knife. And again, it's just notably easier to do that. One thing I would recommend for any knife that you're using the bow drill divot that's in the handle is keep the sheath on, just because, you know, things go flying all over the place. All of a sudden you have a blade, you got to be careful. So just be really careful with that. But having a bow drill divot, that is bow drill divot, not divot, bow drill divot, and how having the divot that is built into the handle for your handhold when you're making a bow drill fire, it's just way easier. And I will remind you that this is reversible, so you can take it out of this side and put it on the other side as well. One thing I want to remind you about is that you want to have something that you can open up the handle with so you can get this to the survival kit. So some people have said they just put like a washer on the lanyard. You can put one there, you can put one in the Theorem cell vault. I mean, there's tons of ways you can carry something, but a quarter, a dime, whatever it is, something that you can actually get in there. I wouldn't bank on finding a rock that is small and thin enough and actually strong enough, especially if you've really cranked these things down. You don't want to be cranking on it and snap the rock off and then just, you know, it's not going to work. So I would recommend having something that you've thought of ahead of time that's in the kit, so you can actually, you know, get the handle open. Last thing I want to mention is that there are these two holes here, so you could lash it to a piece of wood to make a spear. I generally am opposed to that idea when it comes to the outdoors. In a situation where you had to do it, it's nice to have as the option. But I just think you sharpen a nice piece of hardwood and then harden it in a fire, and it's going to, you shouldn't be stabbing something 10 times with a spear probably. If you're in that situation, it's really bad. My concern about attaching a knife to a spear, you know, on a piece of wood to make it a spear, is that all of a sudden, if something, you know, you're really beating on something and you break your knife, now you have no knife, you have no spear, it's just a bad situation. So It's possible to do that with those 2 holes there, but I tend to recommend against it unless you're in a situation where you absolutely have to do that. So in conclusion, if you've seen the opening video and now you've seen this one, you know, I think there's different people that this is for. I like the knife. I've enjoyed using it. I definitely like a system. My mind about knife systems and, you know, outdoor systems as far as tools and such is starting to shift. So I'll talk more about that in a future video. But it's been a cool knife to use, and now that I've kind of customized it a little bit, I do like using it even more because it's, you know, it's set up in the sheath system, the knife, the color, kind of in what I prefer. So yeah, I've got links down below to the other video and also links over to the website where you can find out more about this. And like I said in the last video, there's a ton of ways to customize this knife and the setup, the system, the sheath, Kydex, ballistic nylon, both, whatever you want. So you can click around the website, and then you can also contact David over at Ultimate Survival Tips and ask him, you know, hey, this is what I want to do. What would you recommend? And he'll let you know about that. As always, guys, I want to engage in discussion with you, so leave comments and thoughts down in the comment section, and let's get the discussion started. Thanks as always for checking out the videos here on YouTube. Please subscribe to Everyday Tactical Vids if you haven't done so already. Like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, Instagram, Tumblr, and Vero as well. More videos coming soon. Take care.